I want to ask you something before we go anywhere near the facts of this case. What would it take for you to see it coming? Think about that seriously for a moment. What would someone have to say, or do, or post for you to look at a family from the outside and say something is deeply wrong here? What is your personal threshold? A public argument overheard by a neighbor? A police report filed and recorded somewhere in a county database? A pattern of changed behavior that someone close to them could put their finger on and actually name? A social media post that felt off? A phone call that ended strangely? Something. Anything. Because I need you to hold that question in your mind right now, before I tell you a single thing about the Mitchell family, before I give you one date or one name or one address. I need you to understand something about this case that separates it from almost everything else I have covered on this channel. In the case of Matthew and Thy Mitchell, there was none of that. Not one documented incident. Not one prior police call to the family home. Not one legal filing of any kind in Harris County courts. Not one restraining order. Not one domestic violence report. Not one civil dispute on record. Not one person who spoke to Thy Mitchell on the Sunday evening before everything ended and walked away from that conversation with even the faintest sense that something was wrong. Nothing. Complete silence on every system that exists to catch exactly this kind of danger before it becomes irreversible. And that silence is not a minor detail in this story. That silence is the story. It is the thing that makes this case so profoundly difficult to process. And it is the reason that everyone who knew this family, everyone who worked alongside them, everyone who sat across from them at a dinner table or a board meeting or a restaurant counter, is now sitting with a question they cannot answer and may never be able to answer fully. If you are new here, welcome to Brian Crime TV. This channel is where we go deep on cases that demand more than a headline. We look at the evidence, the people, the timeline, and the full picture behind the door that the rest of the world never gets to see. If this kind of serious, honest, true crime coverage is what you are looking for, hit subscribe right now so you never miss what we put out. And if you find this case as important as I do, hit the like button before we go any further. It helps more people find the story. Now let's get into it. On the evening of May 4th, 2026, Houston Police Department officers walked through the front door of a home on Kingston Street near Avalon Place in River Oaks. River Oaks is not just any Houston neighborhood. It is one of the most storied, most expensive, most prestigious residential areas in the entire city. The homes there carry names and histories. The streets are lined with mature trees and silence, and the particular kind of quiet that comes with generational wealth and established reputation. Officers had been called to the address on a welfare check. The call had come from two people simultaneously, the family's babysitter and a relative of Thy Mitchell, both of whom had been unable to reach anyone in the household since the previous evening. What officers found when they entered that home was not something that any amount of preparation or experience fully equips a person to walk into. Matthew Mitchell, 52 years old, dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Thy Mitchell, 39 years old, dead from a gunshot wound to the head. Their 8-year-old daughter Maya, dead from a gunshot wound to the head. Their 4-year-old son Maxwell, dead from a gunshot wound to the head. Both children were found in their beds. Sit with that for a moment. Not in a bed somewhere in the house. In their beds. The specific place where every child in the world goes when they are told they are safe. The place where a parent pulls up a blanket and says goodnight and closes the door. That is where Maya and Maxwell were found. Houston police confirmed their conclusion through official channels. NBC News reported it. ABC 13 reported it. Fox 26 reported it. The Harris County Institute of Forensic Sciences put it on the official record. Matthew Mitchell fatally shot his wife, Thy, his 8-year-old daughter, Maya, and his 4-year-old son, Maxwell, before turning the gun on himself. 3 homicides and 1 suicide, inside a home that had never once appeared in any law enforcement record as a place where danger lived. The official time of death for the children, as recorded by the Harris County Institute of Forensic Sciences, was 6:11 in the evening on that Monday. That is a documented timestamp, a number in an official record. And it represents the moment two children who had been alive and present and known and loved on the previous Thursday were no longer in the world. It has also been widely reported by multiple news outlets, citing sources with direct knowledge of the family, that Di Mitchell was pregnant at the time of her death. Houston Police Department has not officially confirmed that detail in their public statements, and I want to be precise about that distinction. But it has been reported with sourcing from people close to the family, and it adds a dimension to this loss that is almost impossible to fully absorb. Now, what investigators are working to establish, what no one has been able to officially answer, what remains the central unanswered question at the heart of this case, is why. No motive has been officially released by HPD. No note has been confirmed publicly. No explanation has been offered by investigators. The HPD Homicide Division is actively working the case, and anyone with information has been urged to contact them directly. But as of the confirmed record, there is no official answer to the most fundamental question a case like this demands. And I want to be analytically careful here, because the absence of a released motive is not the same thing as there being no motive. Investigators may be working through financial records, phone records, digital communications, interviews with people who were close to the family. There may be things that exist in that investigation that have not been disclosed publicly. What I can tell you is what the confirmed public record shows and what credible sources close to the family have alleged. And when you put all of it together carefully and honestly, a picture begins to form. Not a complete one, but enough of one to understand how something this catastrophic could have been happening behind a door that no one on the outside had any reason to open. Let me start with Di, because before this story can go anywhere, you need to know who she was. Not as a victim category in a crime report, as a person. Di Mitchell was 39 years old. She was born in Chicago, Illinois, but she grew up in Houston, Texas, as a first-generation Vietnamese American. And from the time she was old enough to stand at a counter and help, she was spending her weekends working at her grandmother and mother's small, traditional Vietnamese restaurant in Houston. That is where food first entered her life, not as an industry or a career concept, but as family, as identity, as love made practical and shareable and warm. She went on to earn her undergraduate degree from the University of Houston. Then she pursued and completed a master's degree in human resources and employment relations from Penn State University. She was not someone who moved through the world casually or without intention. She built her credentials with purpose at every stage. And after she had those credentials, she used them. She held human resources leadership roles at 3 separate Fortune 500 companies operating in the hospitality and retail industries. These were serious positions with serious responsibilities. She was a senior-level executive managing complex organizations long before she ever put her name on a restaurant door. She became a board member of the Texas Restaurant Association's Greater Houston chapter. She owned and operated a women's fashion brand called Foreign Fair, travel-inspired clothing designed to be wrinkle-resistant, easy to pack, stylish enough to wear anywhere, and practical enough to actually live in. That last detail matters, because that was Di in a sentence. Stylish but practical. Elevated but never out of reach. Never performing a version of herself that was disconnected from real life. And then there was her Instagram. I need you to understand why her social media presence matters to this story. Not as background detail, not as color, but as actual evidence of who this woman was and what her life looked like in real time. Going back years, Di had been documenting her life authentically and consistently. Travel content from across the world. Japan, Vietnam, Mali, Taiwan, Jamaica, Mexico, Spain, France. Family moments with her children. Business milestones. Anniversary posts. Funny, candid videos with Matthew. A full, breathing, continuous archive of a woman who genuinely loved her life and was not hiding that fact from anyone. It was not a brand exercise. It was not a curated performance designed to project a particular image. It was documentation, evidence of a woman who was fully present in her own existence in a way that is genuinely rare. And the people who knew her personally, the friends and colleagues who worked alongside her in the Houston restaurant community, they did not need to scroll through that feed to know who she was. They already knew. When reporters reached out to them in the days after May 4th, the words came out immediately, without hesitation, without searching. Warm, present, generous. The first person to show up for someone else. The last person to make anything about herself. Those were not eulogies crafted carefully after the fact. Those were the immediate reflexive responses of people who had known her well and who were describing the same person they had always known her to be. I have covered a significant number of cases on this channel, and very rarely do I sit down to research a victim and find someone who, by every single account from every single person who knew her, was exactly who she appeared to be. No hidden contradictions, no complicating private narrative, no gap between the public image and the private reality. Just a person who was who she was, consistently and fully in every room she entered. 3 days before she died, on a Thursday, Thai posted a video on Instagram. She and her 8-year-old daughter Maya had spent the afternoon together picking out dresses for a family wedding that was coming up in Boston. Thai wrote about it publicly. She wrote that Maya had picked her dress and made sure that Thai was set too. She called it the sweetest mom-daughter time. That was a Thursday. And then Sunday came, and then Monday came, and then the babysitter called. I'm going to come back to that babysitter because that moment matters more than it might appear to on the surface. Now let me tell you about Matthew Mitchell. And I want to be honest with you here because this is where the story requires a different kind of attention. Matthew Mitchell was 52 years old, and his biography reads like something assembled deliberately to be impossible to summarize in a single sentence. He received his bachelor's degree from Emory University in Atlanta. He then studied in France and in Italy. He studied at Oxford University in England. After that academic chapter, he worked as a journalist and a writer, not in Houston, but in London, Paris, and New York City. He eventually came back to Texas, attended Rice University's Jesse H. Jones School of Business, and entered the pharmaceutical industry. Over time, he rose to become President and Chief Executive Officer of the Texas Center for Drug Development, a clinical research company based in Houston. He held that position for more than 14 years. Emory, Oxford, London, Paris, New York, pharmaceutical CEO. That is one biography. And then Matthew Mitchell did something that almost nobody at that career level does. He walked away from it. He enrolled at the Art Institute of Houston, earned an associate's degree in culinary arts, worked in Houston restaurants to build real, hands-on experience, and then in 2019, he and I opened Traveler's Table together. That kind of serial reinvention, from international journalist to pharmaceutical executive to culinary arts student to restaurateur, tells you something about how Matthew Mitchell was built. He was a man of unusual intellectual range. A man whose restlessness moved him not toward instability, but toward depth, or at least that is how it appeared from the outside. He kept going deeper into whatever interested him fully, regardless of what he had already accumulated professionally. There is one detail about Matthew Mitchell that I want you to hold on to specifically, because it is going to matter when we get to the part of this story where we try to understand what investigators are working through. Matthew had no social media presence. I do not mean a small one. I do not mean he posted rarely or that his accounts were set to private. I mean zero. In a world where almost everyone documents at least some portion of their existence online, Matthew Mitchell kept his entire inner life entirely to himself. No platform, no public record of his thoughts, his mood, his state of mind, his internal experience of anything that was happening around him. Thai had even joked about this publicly. She wrote that when they first met, she was convinced he was either a con artist or a man living a double life, because who in 2010 had absolutely no social media presence? That level of digital absence felt suspicious to her. But it was not suspicious. It was simply who he was. A man who preferred books and newspapers. A man who processed his life inwardly rather than outwardly. A man whose public footprint was almost entirely filtered through other people's accounts of him. And what those accounts showed was a person who was genuinely liked by the people who worked alongside him. His closest professional colleague in the restaurant world described him publicly as a great friend. His restaurant staff knew him, the Houston food community knew him, and everyone who knew the couple knew the story of how he had won Thai over early in their relationship. Their first unofficial date had been at 2 in the morning at a Houston institution called House of Pies. Their first official date was at Backstreet Cafe. But the moment that Thai said truly won her over was the moment Matthew showed up to a large Vietnamese family gathering and went completely all in, on the food, on the culture, on the people, without a single moment of hesitation or awkwardness. Fully present, fully committed, fully there. That was the man she decided to marry. They wed in Porto, Portugal, in a ceremony by the sea. A decade later, they celebrated their anniversary in St. Kitts. And I wrote about it. She wrote publicly that a decade into their marriage, it still felt like the beginning. 10 days before she died, she posted a video on Instagram in which she and Matthew were laughing together about growing old. Let me tell you what they built together, because you need to understand the actual scale of it, to understand what this tragedy means to the city of Houston and to the people who were part of their world. Travelers Table opened in 2019 in the Montrose neighborhood of Houston, and from its earliest days it was not simply a restaurant. It was a destination built from a genuine idea. The menu was constructed from the Mitchell's own international travels. Every dish on that menu represented somewhere they had actually been, something they had actually eaten, a culture they had actually engaged with in person. Dishes from Australia, from Japan, from Korea, from Nigeria, from Vietnam, from New England, all under one roof. Thai duck pad see ew, Indian butter chicken, Nigerian suya skewers, mini New England lobster rolls. The kind of menu that immediately communicates to anyone who sits down with it that the people who created it have actually lived what they are presenting. In 2021, Guy Fieri brought his production crew to Travelers Table and featured it on diners, drive-ins and dives. If you know anything about the restaurant industry, you know what that kind of national television exposure means. It does not just bring curiosity traffic for a season. It changes the permanent identity of a restaurant. In 2023, one of the restaurant's chefs competed on Beat Bobby Flay and won. In July of 2025, another Travelers Table chef, Miguel Torres, appeared on Guy's Grocery Games. The restaurant was building a national television presence that extended well beyond Houston. By 2025, Yelp had ranked Travelers Table number 2 on their list of the top places to eat in all of Houston. Number 2, in one of the most competitive and serious food cities in the United States. Houston has no shortage of extraordinary restaurants, and Travelers Table had climbed to the very top of that landscape. They did not stop there. In October of 2024, Matthew and Thai opened a second location called Travelers Cart at 1401 Montrose Boulevard. The two properties operated under an umbrella brand the Mitchells had called Travelers Collective, a fashion line, 2 restaurants, a hospitality brand. It was a genuinely impressive operation, built by 2 people who had walked away from different kinds of established success to build something entirely their own. In 2025, the Greater Houston chapter of the Texas Restaurant Association named them Restaurateurs of the Year. And just in the final days of Thai's life, she had hosted the Houston Restaurant Association board meeting at Travelers Table. Craig Howard, president of the Greater Houston chapter, spoke about it publicly afterward. He said approximately 50 restaurateurs showed up. He described it as a great operation, with wonderful staff and great food. That meeting happened days before the welfare check, days before officers arrived on Kingston Street, days before the silence was broken by the worst possible discovery. These were not people in visible crisis. These were not people who carried any outward signal of danger. They were, by every observable measure, a couple at the peak of what they had built together. And yet, on the Sunday evening before May 4th, 2026, Thy Mitchell spoke to friends. By all accounts, that conversation was completely ordinary. She was talking. She was engaged. She was planning. There was nothing in the tone, nothing in the words, nothing in the rhythm of that exchange that caused anyone to end the call with any concern whatsoever. She was being thy, and then the Sunday evening ended, and then the silence began. By Monday, the silence had stretched long enough that two people felt it. The family's babysitter had not heard from the Mitchell household since Sunday evening. Thy's sister, Li, had also been unable to reach anyone in the family. For a household like the Mitchells, this kind of extended silence was not normal. The babysitter understood that instinctively. This family does not go dark like this. Something about the absence felt wrong in a way that could not be ignored. She and Li contacted Houston police and requested a welfare check at the Kingston Street address. Around 5:30 in the evening on Monday, May 4th, 2026, HPD officers arrived at the home. What they found inside was confirmed by Houston police, reported by NBC News, reported by ABC 13, reported by Fox 26, and documented in the official records of the Harris County Institute of Forensic Sciences. Matthew Mitchell had fatally shot his wife, Thy. He had fatally shot his 8-year-old daughter, Maya. He had fatally shot his 4-year-old son, Maxwell. And then he had turned the gun on himself. All 4 family members were shot in the head. Thy Mitchell's death was ruled a homicide. Maya Mitchell's death was ruled a homicide. Maxwell Mitchell's death was ruled a homicide. Matthew Mitchell's cause of death was a self-inflicted gunshot wound. That is the confirmed record. That is what the evidence shows. That is the weight that sits at the center of everything that follows. Now I want to address the question that everyone who has followed this case has been asking, because it is the only question that actually matters at this point. Why? What drove Matthew Mitchell, a man who had built 2 restaurants with his wife, a man who had shown up to her family gatherings and gone completely all in without hesitation, a man whose closest professional colleague called a great friend, a man whose wife was posting videos of them laughing together just 10 days before? What drove him to do what investigators say he did? Houston police have not released an official motive. No note has been confirmed publicly. No formal explanation has been offered. The investigation remains active. And so what I'm going to do now is walk carefully and honestly through the 3 threads that have surfaced in reporting and in the public record around this case. Not to offer a conclusion, because the investigation has not offered one, but to lay out what is known, what is alleged, and where the line between those 2 things sits. The first thread is financial. Traveller's Cart, the second location that opened in October of 2024, was supported by a $2.35 million funding round. That funding round represented $2.35 million in debt. The restaurant industry in 2025 and into 2026 was not an easy environment for independent operators. Rising labor costs, escalating food costs, increasing insurance premiums, and high commercial rents in desirable urban neighborhoods were creating genuine pressure on restaurant owners across the country, and Houston was no exception. People in the Houston food community have acknowledged that context openly. But here is where precision matters. A restaurant editor with close personal and professional knowledge of the Mitchells was direct with reporters in the days following May 4th. He said, and I am reflecting the substance of what he told reporters, that there was no indication those financial pressures played a role in what happened. That is a statement from someone with real proximity to both the industry and this specific couple, and it is a deliberate statement. He was actively separating the financial backdrop from any confirmed cause. And beyond that personal account, Houston police investigators have not pointed to financial collapse as a known trigger or confirmed contributing factor. The financial context exists in the background of this story. It is real context for understanding the operational pressures the Mitchells may have been navigating. But it has not been established as a cause by anyone with official knowledge of the investigation. The second thread is one that has surfaced through sources described as close to the case. I want to be extremely precise about how I present this because it is unverified. It has not been confirmed by HPD. It has not appeared in any official law enforcement document. The family has not addressed it publicly. But it has been alleged. alleged through sourced reporting that in the period leading up to May 4th, Matthew Mitchell had been experiencing paranoia. What specific form that paranoia took, what triggered it, what the people around him observed or did not observe, what was said or left unsaid, none of that is in any public official record. This sits in this case as a single unverified thread in a picture that has not yet been fully drawn. I am presenting it because it has been reported by people with proximity to the case, and I am being explicit that its verification remains pending and that it should be treated accordingly. The third thread is the one that may be the most difficult to process, and it connects directly back to the detail I asked you to hold on to at the beginning. Matthew Mitchell had no social media. He had no digital record of his own emotional landscape. He had no public archive of his interior state over the years leading up to May 4th. What we know of Matthew Mitchell's inner world comes almost entirely through Thai's documentation of their life together, through the professional impressions of his colleagues, and through the external appearance of a marriage and a business that showed every sign of being built on genuine love and mutual investment. The man's own psychological reality, the actual contents of whatever he was experiencing in the weeks and months before May 4th, 2026, is almost entirely invisible to outside examination. And that invisibility is not incidental. It is central to understanding why this case is so difficult. Because what investigators are trying to reconstruct is the interior of a man who, by design or by temperament or by some combination of both, left almost no footprint in the places where people's inner lives normally leave marks. What the credentialed, documented, confirmed record gives us is this. Two people built something real together. They built it from scratch with their own hands, out of a genuine shared vision that came from actual shared experience. They were celebrated for it by their industry just weeks before the end. They were loved by their friends, their colleagues, their community. Their children were in their beds. Their babysitter noticed when the silence was wrong. Their family noticed when the phone went unanswered. And when officers walked through that door on the evening of May 4th, 2026, the picture that existed in the world outside, the restaurants, the awards, the Instagram posts, the laughing video posted 10 days earlier, all of it remained exactly as it had been. The public record of the Mitchell family's life looked exactly the same on May 5th as it had on May 3rd, except that behind that door there was nothing left that told them goodbye was coming. She was pregnant. She was planning a wedding trip to Boston with her daughter. She was 3 days away from posting what turned out to be the last public record of her life, a video of her 8-year-old picking out a dress. And then Monday came. The investigation into the deaths of Thy Mitchell, Maya Mitchell, and Maxwell Mitchell remains active. Houston Police Department's Homicide Division is continuing to work the case. No official motive has been released. No note has been confirmed. The why remains officially unanswered. But the who is documented, the when is documented, the where is documented, and the how has been confirmed by every major news outlet and by the official records of the Harris County Institute of Forensic Sciences. What remains is the work of understanding, not excusing, not defending, but understanding how something this catastrophic could have been happening inside a home that gave no outward signal of danger to anyone who passed by on Kingston Street, to anyone who attended the board meeting at Traveller's Table, to anyone who saw Thai's Instagram and felt a warmth toward a woman who loved her life without apology. That is what we are going to go deeper on as this story continues. We are going to look at the psychological framework that researchers and mental health professionals use to understand family violence tragedies that come without warning. We are going to look at what is known about the specific pressure points that may have existed in Matthew Mitchell's life in the period before May 4th. We are going to look at the community's response, the industry's response, the reaction of people who shared tables and conversations and professional milestones with this family and who are now carrying a question they were given no opportunity to prevent. Because that is the work that Thy Mitchell deserves, not sensationalism, not headlines that reduce her to a victim category. but the full, honest, careful accounting of who she was, what she built, who she loved, and what was taken from her and from her children, and from everyone who knew them. I want to take a moment to say this directly. If you have stayed with me this far, you already understand why this case matters beyond the immediate tragedy. Cases like this one raise questions that have no easy answers and no satisfying resolution. They challenge the assumptions we rely on to feel safe, to trust the people around us, to believe that the systems we have in place to catch danger before it becomes irreversible actually work. This case challenges all of that. And the only honest response to that challenge is to look at it directly, without flinching, without simplifying, and without pretending that any single explanation will ever fully account for what happened on Kingston Street. If you want to continue following this case as new information emerges, if you want to be part of a community that takes true crime seriously and covers it with the depth and responsibility that the people at the center of these stories deserve, then subscribe to Brian Crime TV right now. Hit the like button on this video so that more people can find this story. The Mitchell family deserved better than silence. The least we can do is make sure their story is heard by as many people as possible. Stay with me for part 2. Stanton Bundy had been the head chef at Traveller's Table. He was the man who stood in that kitchen during the years the restaurant climbed to national recognition. He was the chef who appeared on Beat Bobby Flay during his time there and won. And when reporters reached him after May 4th, 2026, what he said was not the account of someone who had quietly harbored concern about his employer or his friend. He told reporters that in all the time he had known Matthew Mitchell, he had only ever witnessed one minor disagreement between Matthew and Thigh. 1. He described Matthew as a great friend. And then he said that after learning what had happened, he was questioning everything he thought he knew. That is the statement of a man who was blindsided completely. Not a man who had been quietly keeping a secret worry to himself. Not a man who had noticed something and stayed silent. A man who considered Matthew a close friend, who had worked alongside this couple through years of building something together, and who had no framework for what he was being asked to process. That is the closest professional relationship we have documented testimony from in this case. And that testimony says the same thing every other account in this story says. Nobody saw it coming, not one person. Matthew had dinner plans for that same Monday evening. The same Monday evening that Houston police were conducting a welfare check on Kingston Street. His friends were at a table somewhere in Houston waiting for him. He had made the plan. He had confirmed it the way people confirm normal plans for normal evenings. And he never showed. His friends sat at that table, and the man they were expecting never walked through the door. At some point that evening, instead of a friend arriving late with an apology, those people received news that will follow them for the rest of their lives. A close friend of the family wrote something publicly in the days following the discovery. She wrote that there are no words for the weight Matthew must have carried, that this kind of pain does not make sense, and that is what breaks her. She wrote that love was there and still it was not enough. I want to be absolutely clear about what that statement is and what it is not. It is not an excuse. Nothing that existed inside Matthew Mitchell in those final days, no pressure, no paranoia, no invisible breaking point, no weight that had built beyond what he could carry. Nothing excuses what he did to Thigh. Nothing excuses what he did to Maya. Nothing excuses what he did to Maxwell. Nothing excuses what he did to a child who never had the chance to exist outside its mother's body. Nothing. That line does not move. It does not soften. It does not become negotiable based on what we learn about his state of mind. But that statement from his friend is the most honest public acknowledgement anyone has offered about what may have been happening inside him in those final days. Whatever he was carrying, whatever had been building toward a catastrophic breaking point, it was entirely invisible to the people who cared about him. It did not register in any conversation anyone has since reported. It did not surface in the professional interactions his colleagues have described. It did not appear in Thigh's Instagram, which documented their shared life with warmth and humor right up until 10 days before the end. The weight existed somewhere inside him. and nobody around him could see it. That is the disturbing truth that this case returns to, no matter how many angles you examine it from. Let me walk you through the verified timeline of the final days in sequence, because when you see it laid out precisely, the contrast between what the world could observe and what was actually happening becomes almost impossible to look at directly. April 24th, 2026. 10 days before the family was found. They posted a video on Instagram. Matthew was in the frame. They were joking together about aging. She wrote that he thinks they will grow old together, that he will, but that she is Asian and did not have the heart to correct him. Hundreds of people commented on that post. People laughed with her. That post, that laughing video of two people joking about a future together, is the last documented public moment of Thy and Matthew Mitchell in the same frame, laughing. 10 days out. Thursday, May 1st, 2026, 3 days before the family was found. They posted the Instagram video of her afternoon with Maya. They had gone dress shopping together for the upcoming family wedding in Boston. They stopped for lunch at a cafe, which Thy tagged in the post. She wrote about the sweetest mum-daughter time. She mentioned the Boston wedding. She was making plans. She was looking forward. She was documenting a Thursday afternoon with her 8-year-old the way she had documented countless afternoons before, with warmth and presence and the particular kind of joy that comes from a person who is genuinely glad to be exactly where she is. Sunday, May 3rd, 2026. The night before the family was found. Multiple friends confirmed they spoke to Thy that evening. Every account of those conversations is consistent. Nothing was off. No distress in her voice. No unusual tone. No indication of any kind that something was wrong. She was present. She was engaged. She was making conversation the way she always made conversation. She was being Thy. And at some point that same Sunday evening, the Mitchell family went silent. The babysitter began trying to reach them. There was no response. Monday, May 4th, 2026. The silence held through the entire day. The babysitter and Thy's sister, Lai, both continued trying to reach the family. Neither could get through to anyone. And the babysitter's knowledge of this family, not a vague general concern, but the specific familiarity built through real time spent with real people whose patterns and rhythms she understood, told her that this silence was wrong. This was not a family that went dark like this. She made the call to Houston police. Around 5:30 that evening, HPD officers arrived at the Kingston Street address in River Oaks. At 6:11 in the evening, the Harris County Institute of Forensic Sciences recorded the official time of death for Maya Mitchell and Maxwell Mitchell. And simultaneously, on that same Monday evening, Matthew Mitchell's friends were sitting at a dinner table in Houston waiting for a man who would never arrive. That is the full span of it. From a laughing Instagram video on April 24th to 4 people found dead on May 4th. 10 days. And across every one of those 10 days, by every confirmed account from every person who had contact with this family, nothing reached the outside world. Not a signal. Not a word. Not a moment that anyone has since been able to identify as the thing they should have caught. The morning after the Mitchell family was found, the staff of Traveller's Table and Traveller's Cart showed up for work. Sit with that for a moment. The people that Thy and Matthew had hired, had trained, had nurtured, had promoted from within their own kitchens and dining rooms, the people this couple had poured years of themselves into. They showed up. They clocked in. They opened the doors. They kept serving Houston, because that is what the Mitchells had built. Not just restaurants, a place where people show up for each other, even when showing up is the hardest thing in the world. Traveller's Table released a public statement. It read that as Traveller's Table and Traveller's Cart remain open for business, they want to thank their loyal staff who have shown up and worked through these difficult circumstances, ensuring that they continue to serve their community. It asked for unity and respect for their privacy as they navigate this immense loss. And it closed with something that has stayed with everyone who read it. It said that hospitality comes from within, that to honor the traveler's legacy, they will continue to welcome people into their restaurants. The traveler's legacy, that is what they called it. That is what those 2 restaurants have become in the wake of losing the people who built them. Southhouse PR, which had represented the Mitchell restaurants, released their own statement. They wrote that Thai was not only a client but a great friend, that she was a devoted mother and businesswoman, that she was always on her own journey, always looking for the next adventure, that she will be dearly missed by many. Chef Josie Bendra, who had been in the middle of planning a collaboration dinner with Thai when the news broke, told reporters she was always on her toes, always planning, always supportive of the restaurant industry from the very beginning to the very end. That description, always supportive from the very beginning to the very end, carries a particular weight now. Because the end came without warning and without the chance for anyone to say what they would have said if they had known it was coming. Craig Howard, president of the Greater Houston chapter of the Texas Restaurant Association, spoke about Thai directly. He said that they saw such a bright star in her that they asked her to serve on their board, that they knew she would inject new ideas, that it looked like a successful power couple doing this together. Emily Williams Knight, the president and CEO of the Texas Restaurant Association, issued a formal statement. She wrote that they stand with the Greater Houston hospitality community as they try to process the horrific deaths of Thai Mitchell and her family. That to say Thai will be missed is an understatement. That they will remember her as a ray of light who inspired everyone around her. A ray of light. That phrase appeared again and again in the days after May 4th, in different forms, from different people, in different rooms. And what makes it meaningful is that it was not invented for a eulogy. It was already true before anyone needed to say it at a memorial. The people who worked with Thai knew exactly who she was while she was alive, and the words they reached for after she was gone were the same words they would have used to describe her on any ordinary Tuesday. Thai's sister, Lai, posted on Facebook. She wrote that they are heartbroken to share that her sister Thai and her beloved children Maya and Max passed away the previous night, that the family is grieving deeply and asks for privacy during this incredibly difficult time. That funeral arrangements will be shared when they are available. A sister announcing the deaths of her sister and 2 nieces and nephews in a Facebook post, without mentioning the circumstances, without naming the man responsible, because that is the weight this family is now carrying. The grief and the circumstances of the grief exist together in a space that has no clean language and no adequate framework. In front of the home on Kingston Street, a memorial began growing in the days that followed. Flowers, photographs, small tributes left by people who had eaten at Thai's tables and felt, in whatever way a restaurant can make a person feel, that they mattered simply by being welcomed into the room she had built. Now, I want to be precise about the current official status of this case because clarity matters, especially with a story this emotionally charged and this publicly significant. What is officially confirmed, sourced directly from HPD statements, NBC News reporting, ABC 13, Fox 26, and the Harris County Institute of Forensic Sciences. Houston police are handling this as a murder-suicide. Matthew Mitchell has been named as the suspect. He is deceased, and no criminal charges will be filed because there is no living suspect to charge. The medical examiner has confirmed all 4 cause of death rulings. Maya and Maxwell were found in their beds. The investigation remains active. What has been widely reported by multiple sourced outlets but has not been officially confirmed in HPD public statements is that Thai was pregnant at the time of her death. What remains unverified, sourced only through unnamed individuals described as close to the case, is the allegation that Matthew had been experiencing paranoia in the period before the killings. Police have not addressed that allegation publicly. The family has not addressed it. It does not appear in any official record. That is the honest state of what is known, what is reported, and what remains unverified as of today. And the honest answer to the central question of this entire case, why did Matthew Mitchell, a man who appeared by every external measure to have everything, do what investigators say he did, is that investigators either do not yet have a confirmed answer they are prepared to make public, or they have information they are not yet ready to release. Either way, that question remains officially open. And the people who loved this family are living inside that open question every single day. I want to step back now because I think this case is telling us something that goes beyond the Mitchell family specifically. Something worth naming clearly. The first thing this case tells us is that the absence of documentation is not the same as safety. No police calls to a home does not mean that home is safe. No restraining orders does not mean a relationship is healthy. No red flags in any public record does not mean a person is not in crisis. We have built systems, legal systems, social systems, community systems, that rely heavily on documentation as the primary evidence of what is real. If it was not reported, it was not serious. If it is not written down, it did not happen. The Mitchell case is a direct and devastating challenge to that assumption. 0 prior police calls, 0 legal filings, 0 documented warning signs of any kind, and a Monday evening that ended with 4 people gone from a home in River Oaks. The second thing this case tells us is that invisible crises are the most dangerous ones. Whatever Matthew Mitchell was carrying in those final days, whether it was financial pressure, a mental health crisis, paranoia, some combination of all of those things, or something that does not yet have a name in the public record, it was entirely invisible to the people around him. His friends saw a man with dinner plans for Monday night. Thai's friends heard a woman who sounded completely fine on a Sunday phone call. His colleagues saw a restaurant owner who had been building menus and making plans. Nobody had anything concrete to identify or act on. And that is not a failure of the people who loved this family. That is the nature of a crisis that does not announce itself. It builds in the silence between one normal conversation and the next. It exists in the space between a Sunday evening that sounds completely fine and a Monday afternoon that does not end the way anyone expected. The third thing this case tells us is that the babysitter's instinct is worth more than any single lesson this story has to offer. She did not have a specific articulable reason to make that call. She could not point to a prior incident or a stated threat or a named behavior that gave her documented grounds for concern. What she had was familiarity. The kind of knowledge that builds over time spent with real people, learning their rhythms, understanding their patterns, recognizing what normal looks like for them specifically. And when the silence stretched beyond what normal looked like for this family, she acted on that recognition without waiting for a reason that was officially documented or publicly defensible. That call did not save the family. The tragedy had already happened before she dialed. But it ended the not knowing. It brought the world in. And it is a reminder that when something does not feel right, when the silence is too long, when every reasonable explanation has been exhausted and the gut still says something is wrong, that instinct is worth acting on. Every single time. Without waiting for documentation that may never come. I want to end this the only way it can honestly be ended. Not with the investigation. Not with the unanswered questions. Not with the analysis, with who they were. Thai Mitchell was 39 years old, born in Chicago, raised in Houston, a first-generation Vietnamese American who spent her childhood weekends in her grandmother and mother's restaurant and grew up to build a restaurant empire of her own. A woman who earned a master's degree from Penn State and then chose to walk away from a Fortune 500 career because she had something more important she wanted to build. A board member. A fashion designer. A restaurateur who was named, alongside her husband, as Restaurateur of the Year by her industry just months before she died. A mother who spent an afternoon with her 8-year-old daughter picking out dresses for a family wedding and posted about it online because she loved her life and was not afraid to say so. A woman who was carrying a third child when she died. A ray of light, in the words of the people who worked alongside her. And a woman whose sister had to write a Facebook post announcing her death without the words to explain how it happened. Maya Mitchell was 8 years old, born in 2018. She attended River Oaks Elementary School. She spent a Thursday afternoon helping her mother pick a dress and rated the whole experience a 10 out of 10. She was found in her bed. Maxwell Mitchell was 4 years old, born in 2021. He was found in his bed. Matthew Mitchell was 52 years old, a journalist, a traveler, A man who studied at Oxford and later enrolled in culinary school because he wanted to build something with his wife. A man who showed up to a Vietnamese family gathering on one of their first dates and went completely all in without a single moment of hesitation. A man who named every cocktail on both restaurant menus. A man whose closest professional colleague called him a great friend right up until the end. A man whose wife posted videos of them laughing together 10 days before the end. A man who had dinner plans on a Monday evening that he never kept. A man who, according to Houston police and confirmed by NBC News and the Harris County Institute of Forensic Sciences, fatally shot his wife and 2 children before turning the gun on himself. And a man whose friend said afterward that love was there, and still it was not enough. That sentence carries more weight than almost anything else in this story, because the love was real. Thai's Instagram makes that undeniable. A decade of marriage documented in real time. Anniversary trips, birthday tributes, laughing videos 10 days before the end. The love was not manufactured for public consumption. It existed, and still, whatever finally broke inside Matthew Mitchell in those final days, whatever invisible weight became unbearable in the silence between a Sunday that sounded normal and a Monday that ended in River Oaks with 4 people gone, it took everything with it. That is not an excuse. It is not a justification. It is the most honest accounting of something that may never be fully explained. The staff is still showing up. The doors of Traveller's Table and Traveller's Cart are still open. The Traveller's Legacy, as those who remain have chosen to call it, is being honored every day by the people this couple poured years of themselves into building. And on Kingston Street, the memorial keeps growing. Flowers and photographs from people who sat at Thai's tables and felt seen simply by being there. That was who she was. That is who she will remain. Rest in peace, Thai Mitchell. Rest in peace, Maya. Rest in peace, Maxwell. May the Traveller's legacy live on in every meal served, every staff member supported, and every table where people gather to share something worth celebrating. If this story moved you, if it stayed with you in the way that the stories that matter tend to stay, then you already know what this community is about. Brian Crime TV exists to cover cases like this one with the depth, the care, and the honesty that the people at the center of them deserve. Subscribe to Brian Crime TV right now and hit the bell so you never miss a case. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this story. Every single view on a video like this one is a statement that these lives matter and that the coverage of them should reflect that. Leave your thoughts in the comments. This community reads them, and in a case like this one, those conversations matter. If you or someone you know is carrying a weight that feels too heavy to hold alone, please reach out. Call or text 988, the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, available free and confidential 24 hours a day. If you are in a situation where you feel unsafe, the National Domestic Violence Hotline is available at 1-8007-997-233. You do not have to carry it alone, and you do not have to wait until the silence is wrong before you make the call. Stay safe out there.